Good morning, and thank you for joining us today, session 18. 18 weeks of training, 18 weeks of free training for you, plus you can ask me questions. I think that's a pretty good deal, right? I'm excited to be here today. It's Wednesday, so I'm throwing your schedule off a little bit. We normally air on Tuesday, but today is Wednesday. So, happy hump day. All right, so we got a great session planned for you. It's all on production tools. Hey, it may sound boring, but you know what? Production can equal profits, and that's what we're about, right? We're about making money. We're about having a business, being employed, employing people, okay, making a living, and doing something great. Creating recognition pieces, and I think that's great. A recognition piece is a wonderful thing that someone can receive. Whether it's birthdays, anniversaries, retirements. I remember my daughter getting an award. She got a MVP for basketball. And I remember she held this award, and it was the greatest thing for her. And she was like, I got this award. And that recognition for a young person, a high schooler, was so important to her. And she treasured it, and she still has it up today. So we can't forget about recognition pieces and making these pieces important and special for someone. So when it comes to recognition pieces, sometimes you get that big order. It could be for a party. It could be, for just people being honored, employees of the month with big corporations. So when it comes to production runs, how do we handle that? Maybe you're used to taking a 10-piece order, a 5-piece order, the unique pieces, the one-of-a-kind orders. But, hey, you're in business to etch, you're in business to engrave. And let's say you get that person that says, can you handle 300 pieces? I get the calls from customers saying, hey, I have a job that I need someone to do, and it's 500 pieces. Who do you trust to give me that order? And, I have to look and I see, okay, who can handle this with my customers? Who can handle that big project? And who's equipped, who's efficient? And we have to make that call sometimes, and I'll give them a handful of customers that can handle those calls. And I'll, certainly call a customer saying, are you willing to do this? Can you handle that big order? And then they'll say this, what do I need? So that's where we're at today. What do you need to handle that big order? You want to be ready, you want to be prepared, right? Okay, so let's look at what we got here. We got some production tools. I know this looks like a big washer, but it's not. Okay, it's a film dispenser, cover paper, trimmer. We have our dryer. We have some alignment tools, production tools. Okay, we did get a project in-house that we did a few years ago, and we're going to pull up those pictures. This was for an optic crystal piece. Okay, there was multiple awards. There were optic crystal, there were clocks, and we helped out a customer that needed to get these done right away to meet her deadline. And so this, you can see the pictures there. Again, what we did here was we put down a low-tack transfer tape, and we put the crystal awards on them, and then masked them all, and then blasted them all. And then we put them into a sink to kind of separate that photoresist from that crystal award. So what I'm getting at is you have to have a plan. How do you receive this award? How are you going to tackle it? How are you going to execute it? Because you want to be efficient. You want to make sure that you do it in a timely manner. But most importantly, you want to make sure that you protect your profits. And that's what's going to be key, is we have to protect our profits. We don't want to damage the award. We don't want a misspelled name. We don't want the order it was supposed to run on the front side of the glass, but we ran it on the back. I mean, these are all things that are important. And maybe the person receiving the order knows everything, but it doesn't get communicated down the line. So this is where you have to have a plan. And on that particular order, we used the transfer tape, we had the packaging, we inspected all the glasses within 48 hours of receiving it. That is really important. When you order crystal glass from your companies, there's several companies out there that you can order awards from, but you need to make sure that they are not damaged, that there's not a scratch on that. If you etch it, and then you see the scratch later, guess what? You're out that item. You can't get replacement. You need to make sure that you inspect your items before you apply that stencil. And more importantly, within the time period of whatever company you purchase them from, what is their time period? So a lot of companies is 48 hours to 5 days. So you need to know. That's one thing, is you want to make sure you know what that time period is wherever you buy your glass from. So you can see those crystal pieces were drying. We started dropping in the clocks and then packaging them all up in the presentation boxes, and then our customer was able to pick them up. Now, that's a big order. But we also took another order in a few years ago, and it was not so much a big order, but a high dollar order. And this particular project was referred to us by multiple customers because no one wanted to touch these $1,000 bottles. And they were Patron bottles, and they were already etched, but what they needed was a name, hashtag, dropped in. And so this is where we went ahead and we applied the stencil. And you can see the bottles there. These bottles were really large. These were, there were 10 of them. So the plan was, okay, how are we going to make sure that nothing happens to these bottles? We cleared the table. I wanted to make sure that no bottle got tipped over. Everything was cleared off our table. It's a carpeted table. We made sure all the names were spelled correctly. Everybody signed off on them. Put the stencil on. We packaged the bottle in a clear plastic bag just to make sure no oddball sandblast would hit the edge of that crystal bottle. So these are things that you have to take into consideration. What could go wrong? And then we need to make sure that we have a plan for that. So I thought, could someone knock this over? Could someone hit the table and knock over the bottle, then it fall down? And then, oh my gosh, that's $1,000. So with that, we executed this. It was very quick to etch, but more time in prepping and preparing these bottles. So that's where we had to spend a little bit of time preparing, but we also, not one bottle was damaged. There was not one mistake on them, so we were able to maintain profits when it comes to etching. That's one thing you have to know. You have to maintain your profits. You have to avoid the pitfalls. You have to avoid damaged product. And I understand things can happen. It's an accident, but hey, they should be rare. Very, very rare. And we just want to make sure that we are protecting our profits. Okay, so we're going to kind of get into a few of our tools here. Let's see who we got on the board. I'm showing we have some people. We have Sean from Arizona. Good morning. We have Aaron. Thank you for joining us, Thousand Oaks. We have Antonio, and we have India joining us. I think it's Pazak, and we have Nathan. Good day. We have Bill. Good morning, Bill. And we have Robert Richards, all the way from Georgia. And we have Nate from Texas. So welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to move over to our print films here. And now you may look at this as like a binder. What is this used for? And actually, this is a really handy binder. You know that we offer a custom mask department. So occasionally what we'll do is we will save films, print films, for customers. Now this is mine for trade shows. So I'll have all my films for trade shows, for classes, for samples, little things that I want to save. I organize them in our folder. And you have little plastic sleeves that protects our print films. So if you have a customer that you're kind of doing a lot of artwork for, like repeated orders, look about saving them into like a binder like this, and with these little plastic sheet protectors. And it makes it easy to kind of scroll through these, kind of flip the pages, and see what your customer has, so you can just pull through it and then pull out your films and then start producing your stencils. Makes it really easy. It's very efficient for you. And it saves you time than searching through tons of films. Okay, the next thing that we want to look at is labeling our items. So here, I have my trade show piece here. I have these skulls. Raises, trade show, artwork, sugar skulls, negative. So this is a way for whoever's running them. If I ask for a sugar skull, they'll pull the films and they'll say, do you want the negative? Negative. So that these are already labeled as to what they're pulling and what they're running for you. So here is my trade show flags. It shows the flag on the left, shows the sheet size, one sheet, 16 pieces. So if I say I need 50 pieces, then they know one sheet is 16, so they have to run it multiple times. So these are all really important notes that you want to keep on your print films, especially when you're operating multiple orders. It's good to have the information there so that whoever touches that film or that project knows what that project is. Is it a front blast? Is it a back blast? So this one is actually from one of our customers, and I wanted to kind of show you. We use a barcode system, so it pulls up the project, and then you can see here the due date. We're going to ship overnight. We're going to run 4 mil. It's going to be a standard adhesive. So this is all really good information that you can keep on your print film that gets transferred over to your mask. So it makes that information is able to go all the way over to the blaster, to the applicator, and that's what's important, because we need to know, hey, it's shipping overnight. This better be packaged. It better be ready to go. So little things like that, it may seem tedious to type that info, but once you pass that info all the way down the line, now everybody's being communicated. And when your eyes are on the notes, guess what? There's less room for error. And so that's important, especially when we're dealing with overnight shipments that are on your dime. That's when things can get costly. So let's go ahead and take a look here. I'm going to move over to our table here. And most of us, we're using our self-stick film. We're using sheets or rolls. And the sheets are great. They're great when you're starting out. You know, you're practicing your designs. You're getting familiar. You're doing some barware. You're doing some awards. You have an 8.5 by 14 size sheet. But sometimes what happens is as you're picking up business, you have different size layouts. You start to have more scraps. And if you're starting to have a lot of scraps, this is where we want to move to a roll. Okay, so we have a little more control over a roll on the size. So we have some of our layouts here. I'm going to take my flags, and I have, let's do this one. So this one's a little wider. Okay, so we have more pieces, and then we have our flags. So this is how our production team would run, or how they would pull the films and how they would cut your sheet size down. So first of all, our information on here would be, okay, we're going to use 4 mil, SR 3000. So we're going to pull the right film. You can see the film dispenser. This is great because the film dispenser actually protects your roll from the light. You have a door that slides down, and then you have easy access to your roll of film. But when you're not using it, it's completely protected, and you don't have to worry about the light. You don't have to pull it out of the bag or a box. You just open it, bring down the door, and then you pull out your film. We're going to put it on our trimmer. And then what we do is we pull this film through, okay, and then we would line it up, and we'd see which way fits the best. Line it up here, and then we would cut this. And let's say you had to do multiple sheets. Well, we're just going to keep cutting this until you have those sheets done. Now, this is ready to be exposed. So this right here would be one job. Let's say it's 3 sheets. We're going to bring it over to the exposure unit. And you would lift up your screen here, put down your print film, and then we're going to vacuum it. And actually, I'm going to take my squeegee, because you see the vacuum kind of pulling down our screen here. And then what you can do to speed up that process is take like a squeegee with a felt protector screen on the side, and then just kind of squeegee out any air bubbles. Bring this down, and now you have a quick exposure of 6 seconds, and then you're going to wash it out. So this is a great way to kind of know what films you need, how many sheets you need. I would cut all my print film first, or cut all my sheets down first, bring it over and expose all at once, and then load them up in the washer. Now, I'm bringing up another tool here, is a washer. So a lot of us are hand washing, but I know a lot of you have invested in equipment. And the equipment would be an automatic washout system. So there's 3 different sizes, but let me tell you about investing in a washout system. Is it allows you to take on that big project and with ease and quickly. Okay, I can't tell you how many times they bought the small unit and they're like, this thing has saved us. You know how many sheets of film I process? Thousands with this little washout system. Instead of hand washing, you're using your washer. So I'm going to show you a quick video so you know how it works. Okay, so we're going to call for that video of our washer. We're just loading the sheets up. They're exposed. We're just going to go ahead and you can load up 2 sheets on the 1232. Okay, so the 1232 is a model number. And basically, this right here is your employee. Okay, it's a workhorse. It's doing something that is mindless of hand washing. Press the button, it washes it out, and we're looking 3 mils about 35 seconds on this particular unit, maybe 40, but look at all those pieces that are washed out. Okay, so your employee is already been exposing the next set of sheets, and then once these get pulled off the drum, they're loading on the next set, and then that's operating production. That's moving it quickly. If you're hand washing, then you're just going to make sure that you have hot water, have the right hand sprayer to take on that job. And it's, of course, it's a resist hand sprayer. You always want to make sure you're using our hand sprayer, our equipment when you're using our film, right? That's the deal. We give you good film, you use our equipment. Hey, what can I say? All right, let's see who we got on the board here. We have Robert from Pittsburgh. Hello, Robert. And we have Terry. Thank you, Terry. Hello, from Texas. Let me know if you have any questions. Shoot them on over, and I'll get to them throughout the session here. Okay, so let's talk about, we have our print film. We've cut it down. We're just going to put this back here. Now, you don't have to get a big roll like this. There are 25-foot rolls. The 25-foot rolls are actually 35 sheets of legal size film. So 35 sheets isn't bad, and you are in control over cutting down your print film. Okay, so one thing you may have noticed is that when we're looking at our print films, I have a box around it. And if you've watched any of our segments with our graphic artists from our custom mass department, April, she always puts a 1/4-inch box around your art design. And what that does, it allows you to trim the pieces, okay? This one right here is not a 1/4-inch, it's quite larger, but there's a reason for that. This reason is if you're doing several of these beer glasses with this sugar skull on it, you want to avoid taping, you make your mask a little larger, okay? So we are already doing the application of the stencil. But if you make the stencil larger, then you're avoiding the step of tape. Yes, it's going to cost you a few pennies more for the extra mask, but not much more when you consider labor and tape. Tape is very expensive now, and then your labor costs are very expensive. So is it beneficial to add a little bit more mask material to avoid taping? And that's something you'll have to answer when you're doing your project. We have a lot of people that go through that, and a lot of times they'll make that mask a little larger. The other thing that you can do is, let's say that you are having to do a double etch or a double-sided etch. You make your mask to the exact measurement of your beer glass or of your glass. So we have one image here, one image on this side. So I'm applying one stencil, okay, and I'm not applying two. If I apply two stencils, it's a little difficult to line up. But if I have one stencil, line it up all the way around the glass, it makes it easier and it's quicker for me to apply that stencil. So just another side note when you're taking on those larger jobs. You know, think about your mask and how you're applying, especially when you do a two-sided etch. I had some customers say, can you help me with etching? They had a big project. And then I'm like, yeah, sure. Are we going to etch on both sides or one? They're like, oh, you can do both sides? Oh, let me check. And then they checked it was both sides. But it was so difficult to align that stencil, and then I figured there has to be an easier way. So putting that stencil all the way around makes it easier, and you're not applying two stencils, which one stencil will save you time. Okay, so let's look over here on alignment tools, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you. So we have here, I have a couple of different things here. Okay, we have, this one is from Elite Etching, and this is a great little tool. It's like a holder for your glass. Okay, and then you take your stencil. There's a couple different ways that you can do this, but you would align your stencil. So you have a line here. Okay, so you would align your stencil, and then you would place it. Now you have to align it correctly where you want it on your glass, and that you can adjust this block. The other thing that you can do is you can put your mask down, and then you can align it with the alignment line just to make sure it's even. So whatever is easier for you. I believe what they do is they put the mask here on your screen, and then they drop it down onto the glass. And actually that works out pretty nice. You can also do that with wine bottles, of applying that stencil, taking that stencil and applying it onto a wine bottle. Okay, so that's something, these are nice little tools that you can use. On this one right here, I usually have an alignment tool like a target, and I'll put my bottle or my mug and I'll find center. And one tool you always want to have is a water-based Sharpie, and you want it to have a fine tip. Don't get the fat tip, you're going to make a big mess. Okay, the fine tip. And I'll mark my center and my sides. Okay, and then if I'm putting the stencil on the back, I'll turn it over, and then I have my back where I'm going to apply my stencil or my back label. Of course, the label would be removed. But you're taking on a big project with wine bottles, you want to make sure that you know how are you going to protect that label, how are you going to protect the top. Are you going to remove the front label or the back label? And these are things that you need to think about when you're taking on multiple projects or multiple quantities there. Always have one of these water-based Sharpies, super handy to have, especially when you get those wine bottles or you have like the powder-coated tumblers. You always want to make sure that you take your item. We're going to align it here. I'm going to find my center. Here's my center. Okay. And let's say that I need to find my text of where I'm going to place this. This is another tool that you can use, someone made. And if you're interested in any of this, I can definitely give you the information. But this one is, you're going to take your little step, take your Sharpie, and then you can just turn this to do a couple different alignment lines. And since this is water-based, it definitely will rub off after you're done etching. So now you have 3 alignment lines here, or 1, but you can do the measuring, and so now you can apply your stencil according to your alignment line. So that is something that you can do. And so you know exactly where your stencil is going to be. Now you can see how thin these lines are. If I were to have the fatter line, the fatter tip, it's just a big fat line, and it's hard to do your alignment, especially when it comes to small text. So it's ideal to have the fine tip water-based Sharpie. All right, so let's take a look at what else I have over here before we get into breaking down our stencils. This tool right here is really nice, and I've actually used these Optivisors many times, especially when it comes to painting or hand painting or applying very small stencils. So this is really cool. You have, it has different lenses here, so you have the option of different lenses. So you have the first one, and then you have the second one here, and then you have the optional third, and this pulls down. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but you have your first magnifying, then you have a second, it clicks down into place, and then you have your optional. The other thing it does is it has a light. Really nice. The light also adjusts. Okay, and so you can, when you put this on, if you're looking at something that's very very small, or you're having to align something, you can put it on, and then you can direct your light to where you need to, and then you have absolute clarity if needed for those small texts or the small alignment areas. And you can definitely see, especially if you're hand painting, this is a great tool to use. Always good to have on hand. Okay, and these Razors is now carrying these, very affordable. The other tools we're going to talk about when I do application is our rubber roller, our squeegees, and our pickers. And one more thing is a pillow. So this, I'm giving you options here, but it all depends on what you're comfortable using. So some people like to use a pillow when it comes to a wine bottle, and you can definitely, the wine bottle is heavy enough to sit into this pillow, and then you can apply your stencils and do your squeegeeing. So if you're comfortable with the pillow, that's great. If you want to use something like one of these alignment tools with your water-based Sharpie, no problem. You have options. It's whatever you can move through the system quickly, but making sure that all your masks are lined up and squeegee to the surface so before they hit the blaster. All right, so let's talk about some important items that you need to have on hand. Now today I'm going to show you how you would pump out your sand and how you're going to add more sand to your cabinet. But before we get to that, you need to make sure that you always have this item right here. This is called a Footswitch Valve Kit. This is extremely important to have on hand. Okay, it goes inside your Footswitch valve. This is the metal core, and then this is your whole replacement inside your Footswitch valve. So if you've had your system for a year, I'm going to say you need to have one of these on hand. It's very important that you do, because just yesterday I got a call where the gentleman that was operating sandblasting, he lost control over his foot pedal, and he had a big hole in his Footswitch valve. Now, 3 years later, it lasted 3 years, great, but we had to overnight a replacement part. And overnight fees are expensive. So have one on hand, very important, okay? Second thing, nozzles. Now we've talked about nozzles before. I've talked about having a replacement nozzle on hand or changing out your nozzle. Some of us, we're keeping our nozzles for like 2 or 3 years, and you're calling me because you have so much air coming out of your nozzle and it's all the way broke down and half of it's missing. And I'm like, when's the last time you changed out your nozzle? This is what it's supposed to look like. Okay, that's a 3/32. We want to make sure that we have a nozzle on hand, because when we're doing a lot of blasting and you change out your sand, it's always a good time to change out your nozzle at that same time. This is your brass holder. You're going to drop this through. Okay, and then we have a little O-ring that fits in there. And then that screws onto your sandblast hose, so you have a nice tight fit. And you're back in business with a good stream, 3/32 nozzle here. If you're going through nozzles like crazy and you're like, gosh, I'm spending so much money on nozzles, we actually have now I can't bring this up. This is called a rock nozzle. And here we go. These are really expensive, but they're going to last about 10 times, maybe even 15 times to the tungsten carbide. This is our rock nozzle. They're a little more. They're about almost $200, $197. But these will last you hours. For those of you that are using silicone carbide, this is a great item for you because you're not replacing your nozzles so quickly. This will last you a lot longer. And I've had a lot of good reviews on these rock nozzles. They said, hey, it's worth the money because I'm not replacing that nozzle all the time. So you're going to get your money's worth out of a rock nozzle. All right, so now I've come over to the side of this cover paper dispenser. Now this is a 3,000-foot roll, and I bet you a lot of you didn't know that we carried these. But if you're a large production etching facility, you're buying this big roll right here. It's 3,000 feet. No worries, it comes to 25 feet and 100 feet. Very inexpensive. You're going to take your same trimmer that you used for your film dispenser. We're going to bring the cover paper out. Okay, and I have my dryer here. So if I'm trying to move through my stencils quickly, so I have my dryer to dry I have my flags. I'm going to drop this down. Actually, we'll move it this way. Okay, I'm going to move it across, and let's just bring it down here. Okay, so I have my flags here. Let's do the flip-flops. I'll line up my flip-flops here, bring it through. Now, in our production facility, what we have when we're making your stencils, we have a lighted table. So anytime that we're making cuts, we have the light on, so it's a lighted table, and we can see exactly where that line is. So that's, if you have access to that, it makes it really nice. Now here's the stencil we will be etching with today, our sugar skulls. We're going to run this through, and then I'm going to break these down for you. So if you're in a hurry, don't use scissors to cut this. And I'm going to switch this around. So I've used this to cut my cover paper. And, let me bring it over here to this side here. Set up your flow, set up the table to how it's easy for you to have a good flow. So here I'm limited to this table in our classroom, but you want to have you want to set it up to where you have a good flow. And there's nothing wrong with that. See what works. You need to develop a work cell. Okay, and what do I mean by a work cell? I have a little work cell here. It's not ideal for me because I would want to have my cover paper on this side. But you want to have an area to where you have all your tools at hand. I have everything here that I need. I have my razors, I have my squeegee, my glass cleaner, paper towels, everything that I need, wire wheel roller. The last thing you need is your employees searching for tape, searching for a squeegee. That's time. If you have everything ready at your work cell, then they're not searching for things. It's already on hand. The other thing that I've seen is people now having their applicators stand versus sit. Okay, now I'm going to be honest. I have a desk that I sit at, okay, most of the time. And I can tend to be a little lazy to get up off my desk to go get coffee. I want someone else to go get it for me, but I have to go get my own coffee. So I can see where people are sitting down applying stencils can get very comfortable. So we might think about moving people to standing. It's just an option, or to have a counter height table that allows them to be standing. They're a little more productive. Studies have shown when you're standing and working, you're a little more productive than sitting. So I'm working on it. I need to get one of those adjustable desks. But it's something to think about. I can't tell you how many times we've gone to a facility where there's a table and people are sitting down applying stencils, and it's more of a conversation area. And they're actually talking more than they're applying. When you separate people and you put them in their work cell and you start monitoring how long does it take you to put that mask on, now we're getting in a production mindset. Okay, I've gone into facilities where they say, okay, it's going to take you 30 seconds to put that stencil on with tape. 30 seconds. And that's the goal, 30 seconds. So find an easy way to get that stencil on. 35 seconds for blasting, and we're going to get to blasting in a minute. But you should know how long it takes you to put on a stencil. You should know how long it takes you to blast. That's time. That's precious time that we're paying for. You're paying your employees, or it's your time with labor. So know how long it takes you to put a stencil on and to cut down your stencils. That's why I want you to have a trimmer. So we're going to take our flip-flops here. You can see the line that we have here, and we're going to, let me move this out of the way so you can see. Just going to trim these down. So I'm using this trimmer. Now, can you imagine doing this with scissors? And we're just separating. So we're making all these stencils. And actually, someone cuts these up for me when I do trade shows if I want to bring flip-flops to a show for demoing. And then we're going to take these, and then we're going to start to trim them down here. Okay, so I've already cut down several stencils, and this is really an easy way to break down your stencils. Now I'm going to do the sugar skulls because this is what we're going to be etching today. And we're going to break these down. And I'll break down one more. I will tell you that when you have your trimmer carriage, when you have it in this on the either end, it's in an open position. So your film trimmer here is able, the photoresist is able to slide through for trimming. Once you move it, then it kind of presses it down and locks it into place. So you want to open that trimmer to have more freedom here. You make sure that this blade is on either end. Okay, so we're going to take our sugar skulls and we're going to go ahead and apply them to our glass here. Now you can see we've already been cutting up stencils. I'm going to apply my stencil. I'm using 4 mil today. The reason why I'm using 4 mil instead of 3 mil is because I'm moving to 120 grit. And most of our large etching production companies, they're using a coarser grit. Why? Why would you go to a 120 versus a 150? Because you're etching faster. But hang on. That's only when you're using our film, because our film is able to endure. It's able to take that beating of a 120 grit. So 120 grit with a 4 mil is great. You can do it. Now you have to use a little caution when you're blasting, but you want to make sure that you are operating efficiently, and using a 120 grit allows you to etch faster. We're going to show the difference here. So I'm going to try using this stencil application. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Okay, and then I'm going to do one more, because I'm going to show you the abrasive of aluminum oxide and silicon carbide. So we're going to do both. And after I'm done blasting, I'm going to pump out the sand, and then we're going to put in new sand. So you're making me work today. But I did cheat. I had someone put the bag in the cabinet already, so I don't have to lift it up and put it in there. You don't have to see me do that in a dress and heels. That'd be kind of interesting. All right, so here we go. I have my little pull tab. We're going to take our stencil, and I'm going to apply this. That looks pretty good. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to take my squeegee. Let's go ahead and take our squeegee, and we're going to use squeegee and a roller. So I have my squeegees here. Just going to kind of get this down into place a little bit. And then start to peel this clear liner. Once I peel the clear liner, the mask will lay down. Okay. You can actually take a rubber roller here. These are nice little tools. All right, so this right here, this is a nice little rubber tooler. We're going to have them in stock. I believe they said about a week and a half. So we're going to start carrying these. I've already started carrying these little pickers, which are great tools. So these little pickers are nice when you're removing stencil or you're doing some stage carving. Great little pickers, and you can. Those are something that we are now selling on our website. So I have my mask. This looks good. Now my wire wheel roller. Again, all my tools in arm's reach. Okay, so we have our mask here. Now I'm going to have to put a little tape because we have our SR2000 mask. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so that's our stencil. And then we have our vinyl tape as well. So know what tape you're doing. So if we have our vinyl tape, this is a great tape. It's easy to tear. It's good. It's blast resistant, so it's good when you're blasting deep wine bottles. I would be using the vinyl tape. The painter's tape is great when you're just doing some light blasting. I'm just going to kind of squeegee this down a little bit. And then I'm going to take my rubber roller. Okay, so we have our mask down. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of tape on the side on this one. If I was doing the positive image, I wouldn't need any tape, but because I'm doing the negative, I'm going to put a little tape here. But it gives you the idea of making the mask a little bit larger. And I have a larger engraving area, and that's what I wanted to show you today, so you can see the difference between the two abrasives. If I would have did a small design, you're not going to really be able to tell the difference. But doing a larger design, a negative area, more open area, allows you to see the difference between the two abrasives and how quickly I'm going to etch. And that's really why I'm showing you the two abrasives, is to show how quickly I can etch. And I'm going to a 120 grit. So a 120 grit, normally I would tell you 150. But when we go to a coarser grain, we're going to etch faster. Okay, so another thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at starting and stopping on the design. Now this is a big negative area, maybe a little more challenging, but we want to start and stop on the design. So you want to train your blasters when you have a big project to start and stop on the design. You don't need to etch the whole piece, you just need to etch the mask area, the open area. Okay. All right. So I'm going to pressurize. I think we have some, do I have any questions? John. Hi, John. How are you? Steve from Elite Etching. He's the creator of the invention of the alignment tool. And then we have Erin. She says she endorses the plan of having a backup Footswitch valve on hand. That's great. And then Rena, thanks a million. Wonderful. Thank you. And then great. Thank you, guys. We have Michael. We have Randy joining us. And he's... Am I lazy because I'm sitting at a chair? I'm going to say I'm not lazy, but you can have the tendency to be lazy. That's what we want to avoid, right? All right, so let's turn on our system. I'm going to be blasting at 30 pounds. So when I step on this pedal, it drops down to 30. I just lose a few pounds there. Okay, so we want to make sure that I'm going to operate at 30 pounds on the other cabinet. So we're going to take I'm going to take my design here. Okay, and we're going to etch this. Again, I'm using 120 grit with 4 mil, blasting at 30 pounds of pressure. Typically, we would say, okay, if you're going to increase your blasting time, you can increase your blasting pressure to 35 and 40. But again, we want to make sure that you're comfortable and that your blaster's comfortable. I'm trying to do nice slow passes, letting the sand do the work. Now typically I would like to etch a little deeper. I mean, we have a nice little etch, but let's go a little deeper. I have a good amount of sand coming out of my nozzle. I want to make sure that I'm blasting with 50% sand, 50% air. That's going to help us to cut quicker. Sometimes I'm listening to people that are blasting with mainly air. You want to get the blasting done quickly. Okay, I'm going to stop there so we can go ahead and do the other project in just a few minutes. Okay, so the other thing that I like to use before I change out this abrasive here is I like to use a little air gun. Okay. All right, so this is going to be ready to remove the stencil in just a moment. But I want to pump out my abrasive. So I'm going to look for, I believe we have a bag right up the top, sorry. All right, so how do you pump out the abrasive? Okay, I get asked this question quite regularly, and it's just something that's very easy to do. We want to make sure that we have our air. This is your air inlet. This controls how much air comes out of your sandblast hose. All right, how much air comes out of here. We're going to close this. And then we're going to take our sand flow valve and we're going to open that. That's wide open, okay? And we're going to close the door. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this nozzle. Okay, we're going to remove our nozzle. See, so this is just your MPT fitting with the nozzle removed. I'm going to set this up here. Okay. And now we're going to start to pump out our abrasive. Step on the pedal. And now you just see that sand pumping out. Okay, now you can put a bucket in here. Sometimes people put a bucket with a lid on it with a little hole for the nozzle. Let's say that you want to switch abrasives. You want to go to a finer abrasive or a coarser abrasive, and if you only use this for a few hours, put a piece of tape on the bag and put what it is and how many hours you used it. Used for 2 hours. or so many projects. So that gives you an idea of how worn the sand is. So this is a great way to easily take out your sand. We're just going to pump it out until there's air. Now you can increase the pressure a little bit, so I can go up a little bit. Say around, try to get up to about 45. Okay. And usually when you're changing out your abrasive, it's because you have very little abrasive and you want to empty out what's worn in your pressure pot. So typically it would be maybe about 10 pounds, 15 pounds of abrasive, if even that. And we're just pumping it out. And this right here is aluminum oxide 120 grit. And you can actually see it's pretty coarse. I have a customer that does heavy production and uses silicone carbide because they said it's sharper, which it is sharper, but it etches fast. And they just went to 100 grit, which I was a little nervous about, to be honest with you. And their blaster has been blasting for a while, and he knows exactly what he's doing, so the 100 grit's working great. So you can see here, switching gears on you, we're at the very end. It's grabbing some of that abrasive at the bottom. It's going to be a pocket of air that shoots out, and I just know it's at the very end here. You can tell. And boy, we had a lot of sand in this pressure pot. All right, so there we go. That's our sand removed. And so now you have your sand. You can label your bag or your bucket. I'd put a zip tie on it, to be honest with you. Label it and set it aside. So this is how you pump out the sand. Okay, so now we're going to move to the other cabinet. And we're going to use silicone carbide. So what I'm going to show you here is adding the abrasive. Okay, so we're going to put my glass over here at the back. To add abrasive, we need to make sure that we are depressurized. So when I pump out the abrasive, we're pressurized. When we're adding abrasive, we're depressurized. So you can see my air is off, my gauge is at 0. Very important because it means my pressure pot's open and the sand can fall in. Okay, so I have my abrasive in here. Okay, we're going to take a little X-Acto knife and we're just going to cut the belly of the bag to kind of open this up. It makes it easy to drop in this abrasive. And then I'm going to turn on the system in just a moment. So you can, you always want to turn it on when you're dealing with abrasive because that powder will escape. So we want to turn on the dust collector. So I have my bag in here. And I'm just going to start to drop it. Now silicone carbide, this comes in 55 pounds. Aluminum oxide comes in 50 pounds. Okay. So and you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but this is 120 grit silicone carbide. So it looks reflective, so when you're blasting, you can actually see the stream. The pros and cons of using a silicone carbide is, one is it etches very quick, it's sharp, it remains sharp. But it does wear down your parts a little faster. So you always want to make sure that you have a replacement nozzle on hand because your silicone carbide is going to eat through your parts. It's going to wear them a little faster because it is a very sharp abrasive. I'm going to pressurize. Okay, so I'm a little high on my pressure compared to the other cabinet. We're going to lower this. I'm going to step on the pedal. I'm going to drop it down to 30, so we're exactly the same as the other cabinet. right about there. Okay, and so let's take a look at our settings, because we have a new bag of sand. We pumped out the original bag, and so I want to make sure my settings look good, my sand flow. Want to make sure my air doesn't overtake my flow, and that actually looks pretty good. I'm very happy with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start blasting. Okay. And I can already tell this is etching a little faster. And I hope you can see the difference here. Again, I have a big negative area, so we're going to try to really look at the difference between the two. And I'm trying to count my passes here. I'm going to flip this a little bit. So silicone carbide does cost more, but it does etch much faster. So really, it's all in your preference. Whenever we have a class, we always have both sands available for our students. I want them to decide for themselves what abrasive is better for them. And this actually looks really good. You can tell that I'm already getting depth very quickly with this abrasive. The other one, I think I would probably have to kick up my pressure slightly. So I'm probably going to do less passes with silicone carbide and 120 grit. So let's go ahead and clean these up. All right. Okay. So cleaning. How do we clean? We're going to use, you can use a bucket of water, a sink of water. I'm going to bring both of them kind of right over here. And I believe I have some questions. I just got to remember this one's silicone carbide. Okay. So we have someone that uses 100 grit silicone carbide all the time. So see, Antonio, you're making me a little nervous, but I know I've seen it in action, and I know you know what you're doing. So he uses 3 mil and 4 mil, no problem. You're speeding up your engraving process, especially when you have to blast a lot of glass. We have another one. Is there a shelf life for either abrasive? No, there's no shelf life. As long as you store it in a cool, dry place, it's fine. Now, if you have it in your cabinet for a long period of time, I want to know, is it stored? Is your cabinet in a cool, dry place? Is it a humid area? So that's where we may have to have you pump out your sand a couple of times just to make sure there's movement in your sand. There's no moisture that gets in there over not being used in a humid area. But otherwise, there's no shelf life when it comes to the abrasive. What kind of abrasive? I mean, we sell abrasive, but I always tell people, look for a supplier in your area. You want to make sure that you get a good quality abrasive. It's very important. I have sometimes where people will buy an abrasive from overseas, and we don't know what's in it. It's pitting their glass, so you want to be very careful that what kind of abrasive. Cheap doesn't always mean that it's good. You want to have a quality abrasive, and what we sell is like a virgin grain. Okay, so I'm just kind of using my fingers. You can get a soft sponge just to kind of scrub off any of the residue here, or not the residue, but the mask material. I'm using self-stick, so I don't have any residue. Here we go. Here's my sponge. Okay, so this one is my silicone carbide. And now this one's aluminum oxide. We're just going to peel this off. All right. So you see all these little pieces of photoresist coming off? One thing you want to make sure, what we have, is I have a little strainer that captures all of these little bits of resist, and that way it doesn't go down my drain, but I have a little strainer and then I empty this out. And then we have the little mats. You can get any type of mat, but a rubber mat's always great, especially when you're dealing with a lot of glass inside your metal sink. So we're going to take some napkins here. Okay. I like these microfiber towels. All right, so now we have our glass. And honestly, I'm looking here. I can't really tell the difference. Letting that dry. So that looks pretty good. Now this is a silicone carbide. This is aluminum oxide. I can actually tell the difference. Give it a second. Just letting this dry all the way. Okay. So sometimes people like aluminum oxide because they feel like it has a smoother finish. That's really, I think it's hard to tell, but when you look at companies in Europe, they use like a very fine abrasive because they like the smooth finish. However, they're not into how long it takes you to blast each item. I can tell here, it looks like there's a little bit more depth on the silicone carbide just by feeling both of them. Okay, so really not that much difference when it comes to either abrasive, but you want to make sure that you have your know what grit you're using. So are we going to try to speed up that production? We're going to go to a coarser grit. I've been to several etching facilities and they always move to a coarser grit because it speeds up that blasting time. Do you know how long it takes you to etch? You should. You should know how long it takes you to etch. You should know how long it takes you to apply that stencil. Okay, so the very good question from Nathan in Texas. Is there a recommended abrasive for a halftone project? Okay, so this is a good question because you're dealing with halftones, you're dealing with photos, you're dealing with those tiny little dots. And with that, I would say 150 grit. You can actually go up to a 220 if you're dealing with a lot of photos because you're dealing with very fine detail and that fine abrasive is getting into that detailed area. Okay, so that's where I would say 150 grit, possibly 220. And I've been to companies where they have two cabinets. Okay, so maybe they have an older system and they're putting their fine abrasive in there or their 150 and then they have another cabinet with their fine abrasive. So if they're doing a lot of halftone work as well as etching, they have access to both. So not a bad idea. I know it can be a little bit of an inconvenience to have two cabinets if you're not set up for that, but that is something that people do. But halftone images, you want to be at 150, could possibly go up to 220, depending on how detailed that photo is. Okay, so we have Linda from Texas. You're welcome. She says, thank you for continuing the training sessions. We're happy to do them. If you notice, we've been going bi-weekly now, but we still trying to bring you some great sessions and digging into training on what we can bring you. And I have Irfan, thank you. And it looks like we have, it looks like Rena, and then we have Hatch. Wonderful. Thank you guys for joining us. Do you have questions? Shoot them over to me. But what we covered today, production, speeding up that process. Have a plan. So we have film dispensers. This is what Raise This makes. If you're looking at rolls, these are great, handy, because you can access your roll quickly. And then you have your trimmer. It allows you to take your stencils and cut them down quickly. Your exposure, your washing, and then your cover paper allows you to store your stencils. Okay, and then we have our production tools, our dryer, as well as you have your alignment tools. But again, having your extra parts on hand. And it's not a bad idea to have sand on hand, to have an extra bag of sand, because let me tell you, sand does wear, it goes through your dust collector and you need to replace it. So the less time you have depressurizing your cabinet and then filling up your abrasive again, if you just add a little bit more sand to that or you put a new bag in, hey, you're already saving time right there. But you let me know if you have questions. We're here to help you. Again, the nozzles, tape, Footswitch valves, Always good to have things on hand. The dryer, the trimmers, and these will be on our website in about a week and a half. And thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Session 18. And we got session 19, and I think it's the 25th. So we'll see you then. And thank you so much. We appreciate your loyalty to Resist. And as always, we love our customers, and we wish you the best. Thank you.